"You're not allowed to sit here. This lounge is reserved for genuine VIP clients." Abigail Foster delivered the sentence without so much as a flinch. Her voice, cold as ice, cut through the silence like a sharpened blade. At 10:17 a.m., beneath Miami's searing sun, in the polished marble-clad VIP lounge of Summit Wealth Bank, those words landed like an unappealable verdict, striking at Jasmine Brooks's pride. Not because she hadn't foreseen it, but because she'd known the moment she walked in that this might happen. That morning, a soft golden light had draped itself over the palm-lined avenues of downtown Miami, casting a pale, crystalline glow on Summit Wealth's glass facade. At exactly 10 a.m., the bank's grand doors had swung open, and Jasmine Brooks had stepped inside, each footfall measured, confident, yet deliberately understated. Jasmine, a young black CEO who'd acquired this storied institution 2 years earlier, loathed extravagance despite her vast wealth. Today, she'd chosen to appear as an ordinary customer, eager to evaluate firsthand the service of her flagship branch. She wore simple jeans and a light blue cashmere sweater that softly hugged her slender frame. Her black loafers were elegant yet inconspicuous. No designer accessories, no ostentatious handbag, only a slim leather pouch holding her tablet as she entered the opulent space, blending in with any other client. Calmly, she approached the reception desk and politely requested a significant transaction: a $5 million withdrawal from her personal account. The receptionist, unsuspecting, promptly directed Jasmine to the VIP section. Jasmine eased into a plush leather chair in the private waiting area, her eyes quietly tracing every gesture around her, waiting to see how the staff would treat her, unaware that she was the one responsible for their salaries. No one there recognized Jasmine Brooks, the owner of 81% of Summit Wealth, and the surprise test she had orchestrated this morning would not only expose the true attitude of the employees but could, in the next few minutes, alter the destiny of this entire branch. Just as Jasmine settled into the VIP lounge to withdraw her $5 million, Abigail Foster, the branch manager with flawless blonde hair and a razor-sharp designer suit, approached coolly, her sharp eyes immediately sizing Jasmine up from head to toe. Without a hint of hesitation, Abigail's voice rang out, clear and icy. "I'm sorry, this area is reserved exclusively for our VIP clients. I think you've come to the wrong place. You'll need to leave immediately." Her tone wasn't raised, but it carried perfectly through the quiet of the room, drawing curious glances from the other patrons in the private waiting area. Jasmine felt a wave of embarrassment mixed with irritation rise in her chest. A flash of anger crossed her mind, but she reined it in. This wasn't the first time she'd been judged because of her simple appearance and her skin color. Jasmine drew a slow breath and replied in a calm, measured voice, "I was directed here by the receptionist to complete my transaction. I believe I have every right to be in this lounge." Abigail crossed her arms, her eyes narrowing as she searched for a reasonable excuse for this unexpected intrusion. Deep suspicion radiated from her posture and expression. That cold, judgmental look was one Jasmine had encountered countless times in her life. Doubt and condescension aimed at anyone who didn't fit their preconceived image of a wealthy client. "I'll need to see proof of the source of these funds before we can proceed with any transaction," Abigail added, her tone dry and procedural but laced with clear skepticism. Jasmine said nothing immediately. She studied Abigail more closely. This woman clearly had years of experience here, from her confident bearing to her impeccable attire and authoritative gestures. Jasmine realized that Abigail embodied a type she had often seen in the finance industry. Those who use outward appearances, status, and ingrained biases to measure a person's true worth. She reminded herself of her real purpose this morning, an unannounced test to gauge the depth of bias, racial prejudice, and unprofessionalism lurking within her own bank. This was no longer just a personal matter. It was a systemic issue. Jasmine wanted to witness the most uncomfortable truths firsthand before launching any restructuring initiatives. Maintaining polite firmness, Jasmine opened her tablet, prepared her documents, and gently slid it across to Abigail. "Here are the records you requested. I hope you'll take a moment to review them carefully before making any further decisions." Abigail skimmed the screen but quickly tossed her chin up in dismissal, clearly unwilling to believe that Jasmine could truly possess such a large sum. A flicker of unease crossed her face, but she immediately recovered her habitual confidence, as if this were just another routine challenge in her career. Leaning in, she spoke softly enough for Jasmine to hear every word. "If you think a few documents are sufficient to convince me, you're mistaken. We're always extremely cautious with cases that seem out of the ordinary." Jasmine remained unfazed by Abigail's frosty words. She fell silent, her eyes bright with patience, waiting to see what would happen next. She knew this confrontation was only beginning, and that every reaction from Abigail was being meticulously recorded in Jasmine's secret internal audit. A tense undercurrent crept through the luxurious VIP lounge, signaling that dramatic developments were about to unfold. The air, already thick with tension, grew even more oppressive when resolute footsteps resounded from the far corner of the VIP lounge. Jasmine turned, and before she could register who it was, a figure had closed in, his eyes immediately identifying him as Marcus Bradley, a regular at Summit Wealth, renowned for his wealth and clout in the investment world. Marcus's face wore a distinct smugness, his chin tilted upward in challenge as he strode toward the table where Jasmine sat. "How ridiculous," Marcus sneered, unconcerned with volume. With a single dismissive flick of his hand, he sent Jasmine's tablet crashing onto the gleaming marble floor. The sharp crack echoed like a scornful proclamation. "This bank isn't for people like you. If you want to withdraw money, you'd be better off at some pawn shop." Finishing his remark, Marcus's lips curled into a mocking half-smile. Jasmine could feel the suffocating silence of the room pressing down on her. Curious, skeptical glances from the other clients felt like they were burning her, yet she remained unshaken. She silently bent to retrieve her tablet, her fingers trembling slightly as she suppressed her anger. Before she could speak, Natalie Simmons, a young bank officer with her brown hair tied neatly back, hurried forward. Natalie was known for her sharp eye and meticulous work, but also for her cold demeanor toward customers she deemed not up to par. "Marcus is absolutely right, Miss Brooks," Natalie said in a haughty, icy tone, deliberately emphasizing Jasmine's name. "Where exactly did you get that kind of money? I think you'd better explain. Who knows? Maybe you stole it from somewhere." Natalie's words cut into Jasmine's pride like a dagger. The tension in the room tightened to a breaking point. Every eye was fixed on her, waiting for an explosive reaction. Jasmine felt fiery anger rise in her throat, but she forced herself to remain calm. She knew that if she lost her composure now, she'd lose the chance to expose the shameful truths hidden within the bank she owned. Natalie crossed her arms, triumphant at Jasmine's silence. Marcus loomed behind her, arrogance flickering in his eyes at what he assumed was Jasmine's discomfort. Abigail, standing nearby, offered a self-satisfied smile, as if her suspicions had been confirmed. To them, Jasmine was nothing more than an intruder, unworthy of this world of glamour and power. What they didn't know was that Jasmine had been meticulously noting every insult, every act of contempt. To her, this moment wasn't just a personal affront. It was concrete evidence of the deep-seated prejudices entrenched within the very institution she led. Each detail would serve as irrefutable proof for the sweeping reforms she was about to implement. Breaking the oppressive silence, Jasmine finally lifted her head. Her eyes blazed with icy resolve as she stared directly at Marcus and Natalie. "I expect you both to be held accountable for your words." No one could have guessed that within minutes the entire situation would be turned upside down, and those who had so brazenly insulted her would soon face serious consequences for their actions. Refusing to let the tension ease, Abigail stepped swiftly toward Jasmine, her face still frozen in that familiar haughty coldness. Her eyes glinted with deep suspicion, as if Jasmine's very presence here were an absurd impossibility. In a clear but challenging tone, she spoke. "If you truly insist you have that kind of money, you'd better prove its source right now. This is a major bank, not a boutique you can just waltz into and withdraw whatever you like." Abigail's words only piqued the curiosity of the other clients. A few discreetly pulled out their phones, trying to film this rare, dramatic confrontation. Jasmine noticed and raised her hand, gentle but firm. "Please stop recording. I'd prefer we resolve this with words and facts, not turn it into social media entertainment." Her voice was so calm and authoritative that several patrons startled and lowered their phones. But Abigail paid no mind to Jasmine's request. Her gaze remained icy, her lips curling into a knowing smirk, as if Jasmine were hiding some dark secret. She stared Jasmine down and pressed harder. "If you can't provide clear proof, I'll have to ask you to leave the bank immediately. Consider this your final warning." At that moment, Marcus Bradley let out a mocking chuckle, arms folded arrogantly, as if eager to see how Jasmine would extricate herself from this predicament. Natalie stood beside him, her face alight with satisfaction at Jasmine's apparent discomfort. Jasmine realized she couldn't let things spiral out of control. She inhaled deeply, calmly retrieved her tablet from the table, swiped the screen, and dialed a number. In her mind, her meticulously prepared emergency protocol, codenamed Protocol 6, was poised for activation. Holding the phone to her ear, she called her special assistant. "Clara, activate Protocol 6 immediately. I'm in a serious situation at the Summit Wealth Branch. Record this entire conversation, especially the insulting words and actions of Branch Manager Abigail Foster, Client Marcus Bradley, and Officer Natalie Simmons." On the other end, Clara Mitchell, a sharp, capable assistant, responded in a professional, clear, and confident voice. "Yes, Ms. Brooks. Protocol 6 is now active. Everything is being recorded and securely archived. All necessary evidence is in place. I'll dispatch the internal audit team to the branch within minutes." Hearing this, Jasmine felt more confident than ever. She slowly lifted her gaze and locked eyes with Abigail, Marcus, and Natalie, her stare resolute and commanding, an unspoken declaration that she would not be bullied. They had no idea that in just minutes their lives and careers would be upended in a thorough and shocking way. Outside the VIP lounge's glass walls, Miami's gentle, peaceful light remained unchanged. But inside that luxurious room, a real storm was beginning to brew, heralding a sweeping transformation soon to hit Summit Wealth Bank. Immediately after Jasmine's brisk call with her assistant Clara, Abigail instantly sensed that things might slip beyond her control if she didn't act decisively. Without hesitation, she spun toward the exit and called out loudly, "Tyler, get in here right now." Tyler Evans, a towering security guard with a stony expression, strode into the VIP lounge at Abigail's command. He was notorious for following orders from above without question, regardless of the consequences. Tyler planted himself in front of Jasmine, his eyes menacing. Before any further explanation could be offered, Abigail gave the blunt order. "This woman is suspected of fraud and refuses to cooperate. Escort her out of the bank immediately." Without hesitation or pause, Tyler advanced on Jasmine, his face showing no empathy. In a rough motion, he knocked Jasmine's handbag to the marble floor. Its contents spilled out, clattering loudly against the stone. Jasmine froze. Not from fear, but from the brazen disrespect she was enduring at the very bank she owned. As Tyler reached to grab Jasmine's arm and haul her to her feet, a strong, authoritative voice cut through the room, halting the guard's rough move. "Stop right there! You have no right to do that!" Calvin Reed, a well-dressed black client in his early 40s known for his calm courtesy, rose from a nearby leather sofa and strode toward Jasmine and Tyler. His face showed measured outrage, but his tone remained controlled and firm. "What you're doing is outright illegal. She hasn't committed any crime. You can't treat a customer with such brutality and disrespect." Tyler froze, his gaze flicking to Abigail for backup. But Abigail only arched an eyebrow challengingly, replying coolly to Calvin, "We reserve the right to ensure security and prevent risk. I suspect her of fraud, and our security staff are fully authorized to handle it." Calvin didn't back down, his eyes locking on Abigail's. Baseless suspicion does not grant you the right to treat someone like a criminal. This is discrimination, and it's happening right in front of everyone here. The atmosphere reached a breaking point. Several other clients began whispering and murmuring their disapproval of Abigail and the guard's behavior. Marcus Bradley and Natalie Simmons took a step back, visibly unsettled for the first time. Marcus still held his arrogance, but a flicker of uncertainty appeared in his eyes. Natalie, the ever-confident, keen-eyed officer, bit her lip nervously and averted her gaze. Jasmine calmly bent to gather her belongings, arranged her outfit with composure, and then rose with quiet authority. Her eyes shone with icy determination as she faced Abigail and Tyler and spoke clearly. "You have made a serious mistake. I assure you that every insult and act of contempt toward a customer today will have consequences." Abigail blinked at the force of Jasmine's confidence, but strove to maintain her usual icy composure. Her lips parted as if to speak, then fell silent. Tyler, meanwhile, took an involuntary step back, doubt finally flickering across his face. Jasmine glanced at her phone, which vibrated with a discreet alert from Clara. A brief text appeared. "Protocol 6 complete. Internal audit team en route. We have all the evidence." A gentle wave of satisfaction washed over Jasmine. She knew her patience was about to pay off, and that her quiet fight against discrimination within her own bank was about to enter an entirely new chapter. The moment Tyler took that hesitant step back, Jasmine knew the decisive moment had arrived. There was no time left for hesitation or doubt. With absolute composure, she rose slowly, her gaze razor-sharp fixed on Abigail, Marcus, and Tyler, the very people who had wounded and insulted her so severely in the past few minutes. "I think it's time everyone here knows exactly who I am," Jasmine's voice rang out, strong and authoritative, without a trace of wavering. Instantly, every eye in the VIP lounge turned toward her. Curiosity mixed with doubt made the air feel suffocatingly still. Jasmine straightened her outfit with practiced grace, standing tall, exuding confidence and power. "I am Jasmine Brooks, CEO of Summit Enterprises and the new owner of Summit Wealth Bank, where you're all standing right now." Each word fell like a hammer blow to the pride and arrogance of Abigail, Marcus, and Tyler. The room seemed to quake. A profound silence swept through, leaving a nearly palpable void. Abigail, who had maintained her icy confidence until now, went pale, her eyes widening in shock and disbelief. She stammered a few unintelligible words, then fell silent. Marcus Bradley, the wealthy client who had thrown Jasmine's tablet to the floor and taunted her, stood rooted to the spot, his face ashen and frozen like stone. He tried to speak, but no sound emerged. For the first time in his life, he could not muster his customary arrogance. His eyes were empty and unmistakably confused. Tyler Evans, the guard who had just manhandled Jasmine, froze in place. His earlier confidence and sense of power evaporated in an instant, replaced by sheer terror. He seemed to realize he had made a grave, irreparable mistake, but it was far too late to do anything about it. Summit Wealth Bank's VIP lounge was suddenly locked in a state of stunned silence. Even the other clients, and Calvin Reed, who had defended Jasmine, couldn't hide their astonishment at her revelation. Curious and skeptical looks now shifted to expressions of shock and newfound respect. Jasmine paused, allowing the weight of her announcement to sink deeply into every mind in the room. When she spoke again, her voice was quiet, but every word cut like a blade. "I didn't come here today just to make a simple withdrawal. I came to witness firsthand the level of discrimination and unprofessionalism within my own bank. What I've endured makes it painfully clear just how shameful and serious these issues are." She fixed Abigail, Marcus, and Tyler with a steely stare, each syllable delivering a verdict. "You will each be held accountable for the insulting words and actions you directed at me today, and I assure you, the consequences you will face will be fully commensurate with the severity of your misconduct." No one dared utter a retort. The only sound was the strained, trembling breath of those present. In Abigail's, Marcus's, and Tyler's eyes burned sheer panic as they realized the price they would pay for having disrespected and discriminated against the very person who held the highest authority in this bank. In that brief instant, everyone understood. The power dynamic had shifted completely, and Jasmine Brooks was no longer the one who would be demeaned. Now, she alone would decide the fate of those who had dared challenge her honor and authority. When Tyler took that backward step, a fleeting look of confusion crossing his face, Jasmine knew the decisive moment had arrived. There was no more time for hesitation or doubt. With absolute composure, she slowly straightened, her gaze razor-sharp on Abigail, Marcus, and Tyler, the very people who had wounded and insulted her in those few brief minutes. "I think it's high time everyone here knows who I really am," Jasmine's voice rang out, strong and authoritative, without a hint of wavering. In an instant, every eye in the VIP lounge swung to her. Curiosity mixed with skepticism made the air feel thick. Jasmine adjusted her outfit with practiced ease, standing tall, radiating confidence and power. "I am Jasmine Brooks, CEO of Summit Enterprises, and the new owner of Summit Wealth Bank, the very bank you're standing in right now." Each word crashed into Abigail's, Marcus's, and Tyler's pride like a hammer. The room seemed to shake. A profound silence fell, creating an almost suffocating void. Abigail, who had maintained her icy composure until now, went pale, her eyes widening in shock and disbelief. She stammered something unintelligible, then fell silent. Marcus Bradley, the wealthy client who'd thrown Jasmine's tablet down and mocked her, stood frozen, his face ashen and rigid as stone. He tried to speak, but no sound emerged. For the first time in his life, Marcus's usual arrogance deserted him. His eyes were empty and clearly rattled. Tyler Evans, the guard who'd just manhandled Jasmine, now stood motionless. His earlier confidence and sense of authority had vanished, replaced by sheer terror etched on his features. He realized he'd made a grave, irreparable mistake, but it was far too late to undo it. Summit Wealth Bank's VIP lounge was suddenly suspended in a rare, heavy stillness. Even the other clients, including Calvin Reed, who defended Jasmine, couldn't hide their astonishment at this revelation. Eyes that had been curious and skeptical moments ago now reflected shock and newfound respect. Jasmine allowed a moment's pause, letting the weight of her disclosure sink in. When she spoke again, her voice was calm, but each word was a blade. I didn't come here today merely to conduct a transaction. I came to witness firsthand the discrimination and unprofessionalism festering within my own bank. What I've endured today lays bare the shameful and serious issues at hand. She fixed Abigail, Marcus, and Tyler with a steely stare, each syllable delivering a verdict. You will each be held accountable for the insults and disrespect you directed at me today, and I promise you the consequences you'll face will match the severity of your misconduct. No one dared to protest. The only sounds were the strained, nervous breaths of those present. In Abigail's, Marcus's, and Tyler's eyes burned utter fear as they realized the price they would pay for their contempt and discrimination against the very person wielding ultimate power in this bank. In that brief instant, everyone understood. The power dynamic had completely inverted, and Jasmine Brooks was no longer the one to be humiliated. Now, she would determine the fate of those who had dared challenge her authority and honor. The heavy silence that followed Clara Mitchell's decisive words in the Summit Wealth VIP lounge turned suffocating. Every person present felt the invisible weight pressing down on them. Abigail Foster stood frozen, her eyes glazed as she stared at the marble floor, each breath catching in her throat as she realized every escape route was blocked. Marcus Bradley remained motionless, lips moving as if to speak but unable to form a word. Suddenly, amid that tense stillness, Natalie Simmons, who had only moments before arrogantly accused Jasmine, let out a trembling, panicked voice. I'm sorry. I never wanted things to get this out of hand." All eyes snapped to Natalie. Her face blazed red, tears streaming down her shaking cheeks. She raised her hands to cover her face, her voice choked with genuine fear. "I was following Robert Turner's orders, the assistant branch manager. He told me to ignore complaints from black clients. He said they didn't fit the bank's image, that they posed a risk. I was just doing what he told me to do." The room fell silent for a heartbeat, then erupted in gasps and whispers of outrage from the other clients. Calvin Reed, who had stood quietly until now, clenched his fists and shook his head in disgust at the serious confession. Natalie continued, her voice quavering and broken. I never thought it would go this far. Robert always said the bank had to protect its image. I never imagined it would become such a disgrace." At that moment, Tyler Evans, the imposing security guard who had behaved so brutally, spoke up in a deep, remorseful tone. "Ms. Brooks, I have something to confess too. I admit I was given secret orders to mark certain black clients as high risk at Robert Turner's direction. He wanted me to make them feel unwelcome so they wouldn't return to the bank." Tyler hesitated, his gaze dragging to the floor as if wrestling with guilt, then continued. "I carried out those orders without question, thinking it was just my job, but now I see I was complicit in something immoral and completely wrong." Jasmine remained calm, her eyes blazing with deep anger. She said nothing, letting a moment of silence stretch out so everyone could fully absorb these shocking admissions. Natalie's and Tyler's confessions not only stunned the other clients, but turned Abigail Foster, who had known of these practices but kept silent, pale with fear and shame. The once elegant bank interior now felt dark and oppressive, as if plunging into an abyss of the shameful secrets just exposed. The clients realized this wasn't an isolated incident, but evidence of a long-standing culture of bias and discrimination at Summit Wealth. Jasmine inhaled deeply. Her gaze turned ice-cold, and her voice rang out in unprecedented firmness. Every one of these confessions has been clearly recorded. I promise that Summit Wealth Bank will investigate and take strict action against all individuals involved in this disgraceful discrimination. She looked to Clara, her eyes steely as she gave her next order. Clara, deliver this evidence immediately to the bank's board of directors and the proper authorities. I want this matter handled thoroughly and fairly. Clara nodded solemnly, determination etched on her face. Yes, Miss Brooks, I'll make sure it's done at once. The room was charged with overwhelming tension. Jasmine scanned the faces before her, each person now facing the serious consequences of their wrongful choices. And in that moment, she knew this was only the beginning of the deep, comprehensive reforms she would carry out to restore justice, dignity, and trust to Summit Wealth Bank. The stunned silence that fell after Clara Mitchell's revelations was broken only by Jasmine's steady breath. The Summit Wealth VIP lounge felt like a courtroom, every gaze fixed on her as if awaiting an irrevocable verdict. Jasmine took a deliberate step forward. Though slight in stature, she carried herself with an invisible authority, making everyone in the room feel the weight of her power and responsibility. I think we all understand how serious this situation is, she began, her voice calm but unwavering. We won't waste any more time. I'm going to make the decisions this scenario demands, right now. Her gaze cut to Abigail Foster, whose confidence had crumbled. Abigail trembled as she looked up, unable to fathom what was coming next. Abigail Foster, Jasmine announced clearly, you are hereby terminated from your position as branch manager of Summit Wealth Bank for egregious racial discrimination and abuse of authority in insulting a customer. Abigail gasped, eyes wide with terror, but Jasmine pressed on. She turned to Natalie Simmons, still sobbing with shame. Natalie Simmons, you are also terminated effective immediately for falsifying client records and making malicious accusations that gravely harmed our customer's reputation and the bank's integrity. Natalie could only bow her head, tears streaming down her ashen face, the weight of her actions crashing down upon her. Jasmine next addressed Tyler Evans, her tone edged with disappointment yet still composed. Tyler Evans, you abused your power, used force, and unlawfully detained an innocent customer. That is intolerable at Summit Wealth. Effective now, you are no longer employed as our security officer. Tyler stood silent, head bowed, genuine regret etched on his features as he accepted that his career was over in that moment. Finally, Jasmine faced Clara. Clara, contact Human Resources immediately and issue a termination notice for Assistant Branch Manager Robert Turner. He conspired in these wrongful orders and violated our bank's code of ethics and culture. Clara nodded gravely, noting every instruction without hesitation. Jasmine then turned to Marcus Bradley, who had stood by in arrogance until now. Marcus Bradley, she declared firmly, due to your public humiliation of me and property damage, you are permanently banned from all Summit Wealth services. We do not welcome customers who show contempt or discrimination here. Marcus tried to speak, then fell silent, realizing he'd forfeited privileges at one of the nation's premier banks through his own arrogance and disrespect. Jasmine surveyed the room, where the internal audit team documented every detail. The other clients watched her with newfound respect, recognizing that this was more than a single case. It was a clear message that Summit Wealth stands for fairness and transparency. In a final clear voice, Jasmine affirmed, "All these decisions take effect immediately. Summit Wealth will never tolerate discrimination, dishonesty, or abuse of power from anyone. I promise our remaining clients and staff that this is the first step in a sweeping reform to ensure that what happened today never happens again." As Jasmine's last words faded, the room fell utterly silent. Everyone present knew they had witnessed a historic moment, a young female CEO rising with strength and resolve to uphold dignity, honor, and equality at Summit Wealth Bank. As the stunned silence still gripped the Summit Wealth VIP lounge, every eye still fixed on Jasmine after her decisive rulings, an older man slowly rose from the corner of the room. Heads turned toward him, curiosity and surprise etched on every face. It was Richard Bennett, about 60 years old, silver-haired, lean but with a dignified, experienced presence. Richard had served for many years as Summit Wealth's head of training, helping build the bank's foundation and culture from its earliest days. He stood firmly, took a deep breath as if steeling himself for what he was about to say. His eyes shone with regret, and when he spoke, his measured voice carried the full weight of responsibility and remorse. "I believe it's time I spoke up, too," Richard began, looking directly at Jasmine with clear sincerity. "The serious issues Ms. Brooks has exposed didn't just arise recently. They've quietly existed in this bank's system for a long time, and I, Richard Bennett, am partly to blame." His words sent a fresh wave of shock through the room. Jasmine turned to him, her eyes widening briefly in surprise before she nodded for him to continue. Richard drew in another deep breath, his tone growing more somber, as if every word was a burden. "Throughout my years as training manager at Summit Wealth, I inadvertently created a system where staff were taught to judge clients by appearance, demeanor, even skin color, without recognizing that I was planting deep-seated biases leading to the discrimination we've witnessed today." He paused, glancing toward Abigail, Natalie, and Tyler, the recently dismissed staff, as though partly holding himself accountable for their actions. Abigail's face drained of color, panic returning at Richard's grave admission. "I never intended to foster discriminatory behaviors," Richard continued, voice breaking slightly with emotion, "but my negligence and lack of oversight in shaping how we evaluated clients led to today's painful outcome. I accept full responsibility for that mistake, and I'm prepared to face whatever consequences the bank imposes." When Richard finished, the room fell into another heavy silence. Everyone, Jasmine included, understood this was no longer a single incident. It was a systemic failure, a cultural flaw in Summit Wealth that had gone unaddressed for far too long. Jasmine stepped forward toward Richard, her expression serious but empathetic. "Thank you, Richard Bennett, for your courage and honesty," she said gently, but with strength. "Your admission opens a vital opportunity for us to confront this issue directly. Discrimination is a silent disease. It not only wounds our clients, but corrodes the culture and integrity of the entire bank." Richard gave a small, relieved nod, the weight of years of unspoken guilt finally lifted by his confession. Jasmine turned to Clara Mitchell, who had been diligently recording every moment. "Clara, please include Mr. Bennett's confession in the official minutes. I want the entire bank to understand that we will address this root and branch, not just at the individual level, but throughout the entire system and culture of Summit Wealth." Clara responded with a firm nod. "Yes, Ms. Brooks. Everything has been recorded, and I'll forward it to the board immediately to begin our internal reform plan." Jasmine surveyed the room, watching as everyone absorbed the gravity of what had just transpired. Richard Bennett's admission marked a crucial turning point in this crisis, and it drew a line under the years of bias and injustice that had quietly taken root in the bank. From this moment on, everything would change. She knew that facing the painful truth was the necessary step to restore dignity and trust for all those who had suffered discrimination at Summit Wealth. Jasmine believed that from this turning point forward, the bank would truly embark on a new chapter, one defined by transparency, fairness, and accountability. Immediately after Richard Bennett's heartfelt confession, Jasmine drew in a deep breath, acutely aware of every pair of eyes upon her. The Summit Wealth VIP lounge felt more like a stern courtroom than ever, a place where judgments were decisive and final. Jasmine turned to Clara Mitchell, her expression serious yet resolute. "Clara, contact internal communications and human resources immediately. I've decided to suspend all branch operations effective now." Her announcement sent another shockwave through the room. Staff and clients alike stared at her in astonishment and admiration, surprised by the young CEO's strength and decisiveness. Jasmine continued, her voice clear and unwavering. "We will not carry on as though nothing happened. Summit Wealth will launch a comprehensive reform program called the Summit Fairness Initiative. It begins with auditing every employee's language and conduct. From this moment on, each staff member is accountable for their words, actions, and attitudes." She swept her gaze across the remaining employees, slowing her pace, but not her conviction. "Let me be clear. There will be zero tolerance for discrimination, favoritism, or disrespect, especially based on race. We will rebuild Summit Wealth's workplace culture so that every customer who walks through our doors is treated with absolute respect, no matter who they are, where they come from, or how they look." A ripple of applause began in one corner, spreading rapidly throughout the lounge. Calvin Reed, the black client who first defended Jasmine, joined in enthusiastically, pride and hope shining on his face. Other clients followed, clapping vigorously as if witnessing a historic turning point. Jasmine looked around, absorbing their sincere support, then reinforced her plan. "Starting today, we will implement mandatory training on diversity, communication skills, and ethical standards. We'll also establish an independent committee to handle all ethics and conduct cases. Every customer complaint will be addressed transparently and thoroughly." At that moment, Clara stepped forward, her voice confident as she announced, "Ms. Brooks, the notice has gone out to all staff and senior management. The internal reform program is in effect immediately. I've also received unanimous board approval." Jasmine nodded, determination radiating from her. Then, with unwavering authority, she declared, "Summit Wealth will become not only a symbol of financial strength and prestige, but also of fairness, respect, and human dignity. I promise you, we will never repeat the mistakes of the past." The room erupted in fresh applause, strong, heartfelt, united. Even Richard Bennett, who had played a part in the bank's earlier failings, joined in slowly, his eyes filled with gratitude and admiration for Jasmine. The clients knew they had witnessed something extraordinary, a decision that would reshape the bank and the community it serves. There was no doubt Summit Wealth had turned a new page, opening a brighter chapter defined by fairness, transparency, and respect. For Jasmine Brooks, this decisive action was more than a CEO's duty. It was her pledge to herself that fairness wouldn't remain mere words on a page, but would become immediate, powerful action. And she knew her mission had truly begun. The heartfelt and thunderous applause having just died down, Jasmine Brooks scanned the room with a thoughtful gaze. A profound silence returned to Summit Wealth's luxurious VIP lounge. She knew everyone was waiting for the most important part, a final message, clear and powerful, To close out this unforgettable event, Jasmine took a deep breath and stepped to the center of the room, where everyone could see her best. Her eyes shone with resolve and genuine emotion. When she spoke, her voice was gentle yet brimming with strength and conviction. Today, we witnessed a painful but necessary truth. Injustice, favoritism, and deep-seated prejudice still exist in a workplace that should be built on fairness. But the most important thing isn't the mistakes we've uncovered. It's how we will confront and change them starting now. She paused, fixing her gaze on Abigail, Natalie, Tyler, and Marcus, the very people responsible for the grievous errors. In that moment, they all realized they were not just being punished, but taught a profound lesson in dignity and ethics. A person's worth should never be measured by appearance, race, or social bias. Summit Wealth does not exist to serve only those society deems preferred. This bank exists to ensure that every individual who walks through our doors is treated with respect and fairness. Jasmine turned to Calvin Reed, the black client who had defended her from the start, and gave him a grateful smile. He nodded, pride and hope shining in his eyes. Her voice grew even stronger and more determined. I want everyone to understand. Justice only arrives when we speak up. Silence in the face of wrongdoing is complicity. Today, I chose to speak, not just for myself, but for all those who have been hurt by bias and injustice in the past. Again, Jasmine looked at Richard Bennett, the older man whose candid confession had helped expose the system's faults. Richard, you spoke up, and your courage proves it's never too late to do the right thing. Richard bowed his head, moved and resolute. Finally, Jasmine declared with unwavering power and sincerity, from this moment on, Summit Wealth will no longer harbor favoritism, prejudice, or discrimination in any form. We will become a beacon of fairness, dignity, and absolute respect for every individual, no matter who they are, what they look like, or where they come from. As her last words echoed, the room erupted in applause once more. But this time it was more than mere approval. It was an expression of deep respect and admiration for Jasmine, the young woman whose extraordinary courage had sparked a historic turning point at Summit Wealth. Clients and staff rose to their feet, clapping enthusiastically. Some were moved to tears. This was more than a simple reform. It was a moment when everyone present felt they were part of something greater. A powerful, heartfelt revolution of compassion, dignity, and justice. Jasmine looked around again, her heart swelling with pride. She knew that today's message would resonate far beyond Summit Wealth's walls. She had used her own story to reaffirm an eternal truth. We can only build a fair and worthy world when we dare to stand up and speak out against injustice. Silence never creates change. Only courage and a voice can. In that moment, Jasmine Brooks knew she had fulfilled her duty completely. And from today forward, Summit Wealth would shine like a beacon, guiding the path to equality, fairness, and human dignity, a place anyone could enter with pride, confident they would always be respected for their true worth. Jasmine Brooks's journey at Summit Wealth is a powerful reminder. A person's value can never be measured by appearance or social prejudice. We can only create a fair world when each of us stands up, speaks out against injustice, and refuses to remain silent. What about you? If you found yourself in Jasmine's shoes, how would you act? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If today's story inspired you, please like and share this video, and subscribe to our channel so we can keep spreading meaningful, positive messages to our community. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.